Thank you very much. Please sit down. Today I'm very honored to host the President of Poland, a friend of mine, President Duda. And Mrs. Duda, thank you very much for being here. Great honor. It's lovely to have you at the White House. We spent some time in the Oval Office, and we accomplished a lot. Melania and I are deeply grateful for the incredible welcome the President and Mrs. Duda gave us in Warsaw, Poland. Last year was a very exceptional day, extraordinary. It's wonderful to have them both with us in Washington today. Thank you very much, Mr. President. During my visit last summer, I had the privilege to stand before the monument to the Warsaw Uprising and address the people of Poland about our shared commitment to defending our heritage and our civilization. It was an experience I will always treasure and I will never, ever forget. Not far from where we stand today, another monument in another square, the statue of General Kosciuszko in Lafayette Park reminds us that the bonds between our people go all the way back to America's Revolutionary War. This year, the United States and Poland are celebrating 100 years of Poland regaining its independence and nearly 100 years of U.S.-Polish diplomatic ties. It's a long time. I'm thrilled to say that the alliance between our nations has never been stronger, with you and I at the helm. Do you agree with that? Thank you, Mr. President. Glad he said yes. In our discussions this afternoon, President Duda and I agreed to bolster our robust defense ties. We will enhance cooperation in military relations, intelligence, missile defense, technology, and training. I'm proud to report that Poland has recently purchased a state-of-the-art Patriot missile system, which is a great system. We make the greatest military equipment by far anywhere in the world, and it's made right here in the USA. We are grateful for Poland's leadership on defense spending and burden sharing in NATO. I want to commend Poland for meeting its NATO defense spending obligations, and I'm glad that it plans to increase spending beyond the 2% minimum obligation. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to share my gratitude to the people of Poland for their contributions to NATO's resolute support mission in Afghanistan and the coalition to defeat ISIS. We've made tremendous progress with respect to the defeat of ISIS, as you've seen. We also understand that you can't have national security without border security. Both Poland and the United States understand that strong nations must have very strong borders. The President and I likewise are exploring opportunities to advance energy security. The United States and Poland are deeply committed to energy diversity all across Europe. No nation should be dependent upon a single foreign supplier of energy. Poland has worked tirelessly to increase energy independence nationally and across Central Europe. It is constructing a new pipeline, the highest technology, from Norway to Poland, and it recently built a liquefied natural gas import facility. Last year, the United States was proud to send its first export of LNG to Poland, and soon our nations will launch a high-level diplomatic exchange on energy security. And Mr. President, we are now, as of a few months ago, the largest producer of energy in the world. So that's a big statement. President Duda, I also just want to talk to you about the 3Cs Summit, where Central European leaders were working hard to increase energy market access, reduce energy trade barriers, which is something we have to get done with respect to the European Union. The trade barriers, they make it very difficult for the United States, and to strengthen energy independence. The United States firmly supports these goals, and we are eager to expand commercial ties all across the region of Europe. In our meeting today, the President and I discussed our bilateral economic relationship at length. Poland has experienced more than a quarter of a century of uninterrupted economic growth, which is a very big statement. Very few can say that. And we look forward to further enhancing trade, investment, and commerce between our two great nations. My administration is committed to realizing a future of prosperity and opportunity for all Americans. This month, we celebrated the highest employment level in U.S. history. We are right now employing more people. We have more workers in the United States than at any time ever in U.S. history. I look forward to partnering with President Duda as we grow our economies together. Mr. President, thank you for joining me today. Poland has chosen its place among the free and independent nations of the world, and is a loyal ally and strategic partner of the United States, and we greatly appreciate that. We welcome the next 100 years of friendship between our two nations. Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you.
So what is going to happen here? President Duda of Poland will make his opening remarks. Then we're going to come back in a few moments when they take questions. Typically, it'll be 2 questions from the White House media and 2 from the traveling, in this case, the Polish media. So we're going to get to that in a moment because we expect the president to be asked and answer questions related to the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court nomination. While we're waiting for the Q&A portion, let me go to NBC's Casey Hunt on Capitol Hill, where preparations are underway for what will now be a hearing about the allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. Casey, do we know whether his accuser is going to be attending that hearing?
Well, that's the big question of the afternoon, Lester. And while the plan right now is still on track to have this hearing on Monday, and we know that Judge Kavanaugh has accepted, we have not heard anything here on Capitol Hill from Dr. Ford or from her lawyer. And there has been radio silence, we're told, to the Judiciary Committee. They have made repeated inquiries to her and her attorney over the course of the last 36 hours. And both Chuck Grassley, the chairman, and Dianne Feinstein, the ranking member, say that they have heard absolutely nothing in response. So that simply means that there is a huge question right now over whether or not this would go forward. Senator Feinstein acknowledged that if Dr. Ford doesn't want to appear on Monday, it's unlikely that the hearing will go forward. Democrats, of course, have been demanding that the FBI reopen the background investigation into Kavanaugh, and so far the FBI has declined to do so. There may be some questions about whether Dr. Ford is interested in seeing that investigation reopened, but the reality is right now we simply do not know. So as this news cycles move more and more quickly in the Trump era, the time that has stretched on since this invitation was extended yesterday evening is starting to feel like a very long time here in the halls of the Capitol, Lester.
All right, Casey, I want to go to Chuck Todd now. He's watching all this in our Washington newsroom. Chuck, talk if you can about the White House being quite on message here on this, giving the space, saying it's okay for a little delay. We want to hear from her. It's more on message than we typically see this White House.
It is, and it tells me that this White House, and certainly the president, either he himself has decided this or he's been convinced to say, don't defend Brett Kavanaugh more than Brett Kavanaugh will defend himself. Don't get out ahead of him. I think the fear that I've heard among some Republicans is that the president will go rogue, that he'll view the attack on Kavanaugh as an attack on himself, and what he does may make him feel better on social media, but it will create more problems. Obviously, they've gotten him not to do that, and he has done a lot of patience because, look, I think at the end of the day, they know they have a vote issue. If they had the votes, they wouldn't be talking about a hearing. They wouldn't be talking about the need for delay. But it was clear that enough Senate Republicans said, everybody needs to be heard before I'm comfortable voting. And whether enough is 2 or 4 or, it only needed really to be 2. And we know both Jeff Flake and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, 3 of the 4 that we've been highlighting as sort of the Republicans to watch in the Senate side. All of them have indicated that they want to hear more and aren't ready to rush this. So, look, it seems to me that the White House has made this decision. This is Brett Kavanaugh's defense to make. They'll defend him on anything he wants them to defend him on, but he's got to be willing to defend himself before they go and, shall we say, over-defend him.
All right. Again, we're waiting for the president to begin taking questions. A moment, we'll go back there when he does. But let me bring in Andrea Mitchell right now, who covered the Clarence Thomas story, the Anita Hill story back in 1991. Andrea, does it appear that they're trying to take lessons from that experience, that is serving as somewhat of a guide here?
Yes, absolutely. Although some of the senators already, Senator Hatch, who was there back then, was again raising questions about him and his willingness just last night to dismiss the allegations out of hand. So some other senators, though Lindsey Graham and others, are taking that lesson from what happened back in 1991, the really difficult hearing that still remained a sort of lightning rod for the women's movement in particular. And certainly now in the Me Too era would even be more so, this close to a midterm. Back in 1991, they were not an election year. Now they are that close to a midterm, and we know that Senator McConnell and the other Republican leaders are very concerned about how some of their Republican incumbent senators, all men, Republicans on this committee, the 4 women on the committee are all Democrats, how they would appear if they really were to go in and give a tough time to this witness if she were to appear.
I'm wondering, does that help us understand some of the deference the White House is putting forward here, and even the Senate, in terms of giving her space and inviting Dr. Ford to come?
Absolutely. And the other thing that was a little bit confusing and still needs to be cleared up, and we hope that some of the questioners will right now, is the president saying that the FBI does not want to get involved. Now, the FBI, at Senator Feinstein's request, referred this to the FBI. They, instead of reopening the investigation, put it in the background file and left it there. And we're told by our advisors, who are former FBI officials, Frank Figliuzzi, Chuck Rosenberg, and others, that it is up to the requesting agency, which is the presidency, the White House. They ordered the background check for their nominee. It is up to them to ask the FBI to reopen it, not up to the FBI. But the fact is, there's a lot of pressure from Democrats. They want more witnesses. And what Senator Blumenthal, who's a former attorney general and prosecutor, is saying, and others, is that they don't want to have this hearing until they have the facts laid out, or they will have a repeat of 1991, where senators were asking terribly embarrassing questions they didn't have the answers to, and forcing Anita Hill to answer in explicit sexual detail. No one really wants that kind of a repeat. But just to repeat what the president said earlier today in the Oval Office when questioned, I don't think the FBI should be involved because they don't want to be involved. This is not their thing. And that's his interpretation. But the fact is, if he ordered the FBI to reopen it, that would happen.
All right, Andrea. Kristen Welker is part of our White House team. I want to go to her now. Kristen, what's the mood been like in the White House over all this?
Well, this is damage control mode here at the White House, Lester. I can tell you that Judge Brett Kavanaugh spent about 9 hours here yesterday meeting with top officials, including White House counsel Don McGahn, reaching out to lawmakers personally, making his case. What did he tell them? Well, according to Orrin Hatch and according to a White House official, his case is that he was never at that party in question. He is back again today, meeting with top officials here. I pressed part of his team on the extent to which he's going to prepare for that hearing on Monday if it should take place. This official didn't want to go into details, but made it very clear he is, quote, chomping at the bit to clear his name, and so he will prepare in the way that you would expect, Lester. This is obviously something that the president was looking to as a win heading into the midterm elections, and now it has been thrown into jeopardy. So certainly damage control here, Lester, and I think that the conversation is going to center around what Andrea was just talking about, the growing calls from Democrats for the FBI to reopen an investigation. So the White House watching very closely as this press conference gets underway. Will President Trump continue to be disciplined in his remarks? We'll have to see, Lester.
Kristen Welker, thanks. We continue to watch the Polish president making his opening remarks. We should hear from both of them. The president will be taking questions. Another topic that may come up today, we should keep you in mind, is the Russia investigation and the president's decision to declassify some critical documents, some email chains, some text chains that may bode well for the Justice Department. So he may talk about that as well. Let me, if I can, go back to Casey Hunt now while we wait the president. Casey, what exactly are they offering Dr. Ford? Would this have to be a public forum? Is there a mechanism for her to testify behind closed doors?
Well, the reality is, Lester, that the perception among Republicans was that the demand was that this testimony be in public. And there was a perception that if they proposed closed-door testimony or depositions or some other form of speaking with her, that it would be perceived as a cop-out, that they would be protecting Judge Kavanaugh by doing that. And I think they were operating also under the assumption that Dr. Ford was willing to and interested in testifying based on what her lawyer, Deborah Katz, said to Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show, just a few hours before this all unfolded yesterday. So I'm not sure that there was a perception that there would be a preference for a different way of going about this. Now, perhaps if that preference is communicated, there may be something different. I mean, if Dr. Ford goes out in public and says, look, I don't want to go through the spectacle, but I do want to tell my story via deposition, that, of course, would give Republicans a different way to handle this that they could then go out and defend. So the challenge here right now is that we really don't know what the accuser in this case wants to happen next. And we do know that she was very reluctant to get to this point, that she had initially said she wanted to communicate this, wrote that letter to her congressperson, but then decided, as she learned more about exactly how much it would upend her life, she decided that she wanted to keep her name private. And that's why Dianne Feinstein says that she didn't do anything with this information for about 6 weeks. Of course, it leaked out, and we are now here because Dr. Ford decided that those negative ramifications were coming to her anyway, and that it was her civic duty to come forward. But of course, speaking to one reporter being written about in the press is very, very different from what we all know would be just an unbelievable public spectacle up here on Capitol Hill on Monday. So again, it's impossible to overstate the somewhat bizarre situation everyone here feels that they are in right now without having any information about how Dr. Ford wants to proceed. Lester.
All right, Casey, thank you very much. President Duda has concluded his opening remarks. The president about to take questions. Let's go back.
Exported to Poland. We're giving them a pretty good price, but they're buying a lot of it, and that's going to be great. I do want to say that while we're together, tremendous effort and bravery is being shown in North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and the area that was so horribly hit by Hurricane Florence. I just got some clips of some of the things that the Coast Guard is doing and getting people to safety in horrible, horrible conditions. And I want to just salute all of the people that are working so hard, the first responders, law enforcement, the military, FEMA. The job they're doing is incredible. It's incredible. So I just want to thank them very much. And I think what we'll do is we'll take our first question from Emerald Robinson of One America News. Emerald.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, news today of a Russian plane shot down over Syria. Russia is assigning the blame to Israel, even though it was accidentally shot down by Syrian forces. Clearly, things are heating up. There's concerns by many Americans, most Americans, that we might be involved in a war in Syria soon. You had hoped to bring troops home, but clearly things are changing. What do you tell American people today about a possibility of war in Syria?
Well, I just heard about the incident you have mentioned, Emerald, and it sounds to me, and it seems to me, just like based on a review of the facts, that Syria shot down a Russian plane. And I understand about 14 people were killed, at least. And that's a very sad thing, but that's what happens. But Syria, according to early reports, that's subject to change, but that Syria shot down a Russian plane. So that's not a good situation. We have done a tremendous job in Syria and in that region eradicating ISIS, which is why we're there. And we're very close to being finished with that job. And then we're going to make a determination as to what we're going to do. But we have eradicated ISIS in a very large area of the Middle East. These are people that will not be coming here because they're not around any longer. So we've done in a very short period of time. Our Vice President is here, Mike Pence, our great Secretary of State, who really, thank you very much for the great job you're doing, Mike Pompeo. And we've been working very hard on this, and they've done an incredible job over there, but we'll make a decision fairly quickly. Thank you very much. Would you have a question for the President?
Certainly. Thank you, President Duda. Clearly, you said you asked President Trump if he would consider a permanent base in Poland, and of course, that also relates to Russia. What would you say, how did the President respond to your position to have a permanent base from America in Poland? And then also, do you currently have concerns over the U.S.-Russia relationship?
Oczywiście.
Well, of course, I told Mr. President about all the aspects connected with the permanent presence of the U.S. Armed Forces in Poland. But first and foremost, I assured Mr. President of one thing. First and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot say that if there are permanent bases of the U.S. Armed Forces in Poland, we will see a deterioration of security, because that will lead to an increased Russian activity and an increased militarization of this part of Europe by Russia. I want to say it clearly, ladies and gentlemen, a very strong militarization of, for instance, Kaliningrad Oblast has taken place for more than 10 years now. It is the reality that we live in today. As far as an aggressive Russian behavior is concerned, as far as increased military activity is concerned, including increasing of the militarization, Russia has been conducting such activities in a systematic way. And for the first time, we're able to see that in a materialized way in Georgia in 2008, when the then President of Poland, Professor Lech Kaczynski, took other European leaders, and they went to Tbilisi to stop Russian tanks which were about to attack the capital of Georgia. And from that moment, that military expansion has been developing. It's another leg was the attack on Ukraine. And today we can see an illegal annexation of Crimea. Today we are witnessing constant violation of international law in the Lugansk and Donetsk oblasts. So these are today political and military facts of Europe. And the presence of the United States is only providing a guarantee of security and a possibility to defend. Because let me reiterate again, it is only about the guarantee of security and defense of our part of Europe, that is the free world. This is the most crucial issue right now from our perspective, from the perspective of Central and Eastern European countries. And we are speaking in one voice on this one, generally. That is why we wanted to ensure the presence of the United States Armed Forces, and also we wanted to have the presence of NATO forces in our part of Europe as well. And of course, Mr. President and his staff, his advisors, and also the Pentagon staff have to consider all these issues, but there is a whole range of arguments which are in favor of the fact that the presence of the U.S. Armed Forces in this area is absolutely justified today. That is due to the protection of the interests of the United States as well. So I'm absolutely convinced of this one, because today, unfortunately, we are seeing international law being violated. Today, we are seeing aggressive behaviors, and I am convinced that there is no more effective method of preventing a war than a decisive stance, demonstrating that we are ready any moment to repel a possible attack. And a presence also means deterrence. At the same time, I am convinced that when we have a strong military presence in this part of Europe where there is a potential threat, then there will be no war happening ever.
And I think it should be pointed out that the President also said, and he said it publicly, that he would pay the United States, meaning Poland would be paying billions of dollars for a base. And we're looking at that more and more from the standpoint of defending really wealthy countries and not being reimbursed, paid. It's one thing when we defend countries that can't defend themselves, and they're great people and we should help them. We don't expect anything for that. But when we're defending immensely wealthy countries and they're not paying for the defense to the United States, they're only taking advantage of us. And we are in discussions with numerous countries, all of whom you know, about payment. And we get along with them very well, but it's not fair. That includes NATO. As you know, I got $44 billion additional last year, where they paid an additional. You can speak to Secretary General Stoltenberg, who's the head of NATO, and he said he's never seen anything like it. And this year we did even better. But when a country is very wealthy, and when the United States has been protecting them for many years at tremendous cost like nobody in this room would believe, it's time that they help with, we call it burden sharing, and they will do that. But the president offered us much more than $2 billion to do this, and so we're looking at it. We're looking at it from the standpoint of, number one, military protection for both countries, and also cost, a term you don't hear too often, and you haven't heard too often over the last 25 years, but that's the way it has to be. Thank you very much. Would you like to have a question, please?
Dzień dobry,
Marzena Kozłowska, Polish Press Agency. I've got a question to President Trump. Do you share the conviction, which we have just heard a minute ago, expressed by President Duda concerning the threat which is posed to the region, but not only to the region, by Russia? And do you also share the view that permanent American bases in Poland are justified not only due to the security of the countries in our region, but also due to the security of the United States?
I think it's a very aggressive situation. I think Russia has acted aggressively. They respect force. They respect strength, as anyone does. And we have the greatest strength in the world, especially now. We were being depleted under the last administration. We had planes that were old and tired and didn't fly in some cases. They were getting used parts. This is the United States. It doesn't happen. We make the greatest planes in the world and missiles in the world. And we have enhanced, to put it mildly, our military. It's literally being rebuilt as we speak, with literally hundreds and hundreds of planes and missiles and everything that you can imagine. They never had it so good, because I got in Congress $700 billion this year, $716 billion last year. That's far more than they ever anticipated. I viewed it two ways. Number one, military, because it's always more important than anything else, including jobs. But number two is jobs. We make everything here. So it's hundreds of thousands of jobs to make for us the best military in the world. And Russia respects that. They respect that. So I am with the president. I feel that he's right. And I feel that, look, you look at the history of Poland and Russia, that's a long and very complicated history. So certainly he has a right to feel that way. Okay?
And a question to President Duda. After the meeting that you have had today at the White House, do you have the feeling that the probability that Polish expectations concerning permanent American presence in our country are closer to being implemented? Are they going to be a fact?
I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, today myself and Mr. President had a tete-a-tete meeting, a private meeting, and then we met also with our staff. We had long conversations, very honest discussions, and very strong at certain points as well, in terms of diagnosis of the situation in the area of military security and energy security alike. And I am convinced that all of us are going to draw appropriate conclusions from these discussions, because, as I said, both sides presented their positions in many, absolutely many elements. They are concurrent as far as the assessment of the situation currently is, what kind of steps need to be taken in order to protect both the issue of security and the issue of interests. These are business-related issues. I am convinced that Ladies and gentlemen, you are going to see the results of both our meetings today and of the declaration that we have signed together with Mr. President. Of course, we are talking about long-term processes, so I'm sure that you are going to see how this is going to be filled with content. And you will see concrete facts that will appear on the maps and also in agreements and in purchases that are going to be realized.
Thank you very much. John Decker of Fox, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions for you, one on Judge Kavanaugh and also one on trade. On Judge Kavanaugh, yesterday you said, we want to go through a full process. You said, we want to make sure everything is perfect, everything is just right. To that end, what would be the problem with the FBI reopening their background investigation into Judge Kavanaugh? Would you support such a thing?
It wouldn't bother me other than the FBI, John, said that they really don't do that. That's not what they do. And now they have done supposedly 6 background checks over the years as Judge Kavanaugh has gone beautifully up a ladder. He's an incredible individual, great intellect, great judge, impeccable history in every way, in every way. I feel so badly for him that he's going through this, to be honest with you. I feel so badly for him. This is not a man that deserves this. This should have been brought to the fore. It should have been brought up long ago. And that's what you have hearings for. You don't wait till the hearing is over and then all of a sudden bring it up. When Senator Feinstein sat with Judge Kavanaugh for a long period of time, a long, long meeting, she had this letter. Why didn't she bring it up? Why didn't she bring it up then? Why didn't the Democrats bring it up then? Because they obstruct and because they resist. That's the name of their campaign against me. They just resist and they just obstruct. And frankly, I think they're lousy on policy, and in many ways they're lousy politicians, but they're very good on obstruction. And it's a shame because this is a great gentleman. With all of that, I feel that the Republicans, and I can speak for myself, we should go through a process because there shouldn't even be a little doubt. There shouldn't be a doubt. Again, they knew what they were doing. They should have done this a long time ago, 3 months ago, not now. But they did it now. So I don't want to play into their hands. Hopefully, the woman will come forward, state her case. He will state his case before representatives of the United States Senate, and then they will vote. They will look at his career. They will look at what she had to say from 36 years ago, and we will see what happens. But I just think he is at a level that we rarely see, not only in government, anywhere in life. And honestly, I feel terribly for him, for his wife, who is an incredible, lovely woman, and for his beautiful young daughters. I feel terribly for them.
On trade, Mr. President, you announced new trade tariffs against China. Trade tariffs are a very important part of your economic and trade policy. In your first year in office, the U.S. trade deficit increased by 12%. And last month, we saw the trade deficit increase to, I believe it was $72 billion. So my question to you is your trade tariffs policy working?
Well, we just started. We didn't do anything with respect to China because we wanted to have the benefit of China having to do with North Korea. And they have been helpful. I hope they're still helpful. There's a question about that. But it got to a point where the numbers were too big. This should have been done for the last 20 years. If you look at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, that's when China really happened economically. It was like a rocket ship because they took advantage of the rules of the WTO. And whoever was standing at this podium in this incredible White House, in the Oval Office, they should have done something about this long ago. Over the last number of years, China has taken out of this country $500 billion and more. A year. $500 billion. That would go a long way for Poland, wouldn't it? You could rebuild your whole country. And that's what China did. They rebuilt their country with tremendous amounts of money pouring out of the United States. And I've changed that around. And if you look at what's going on, our market is going up like a rocket ship. I don't want their market to go down, but their market is down 32% in 3 months. Because we can't let them do anymore what they've done. And I watch trade deficits because to me deficits are very important. They're not everything, and they're not exact. Sometimes you can have a deficit, and that's not such a bad thing. But when you have $375 billion in trade deficits, and then many billions of dollars in other liabilities of all different types, you have to do something about it. We are the piggy bank to the world. We've been ripped off by China. We've been ripped off by, excuse me, Mr. President, the European Union, of which you're a part of. We've been ripped off by everybody. And I want to protect the American worker, the American farmer, the ranchers, the companies. And we're not being ripped off, you will see in a little while. Speaking of that, we've come to a conclusion with Mexico. We have a wonderful deal for both parties. It was a very one-sided deal. Now it's a good deal for both parties. Very happy with it. The new president had conversation, and it was terrific. I think we're going to have a very good relationship. We'll see. We'll see. We want help on the border because we have the worst immigration laws in the history of mankind or womankind. We have horrible, horrible immigration laws, so we want help. But we've come to a conclusion with Mexico. Canada has taken advantage of our country for a long time. We love Canada. We love it. Love the people of Canada. But they are in a position that's not a good position for Canada. They cannot continue to charge us 300% tariff on dairy products. And that's what they're doing. So this is a process. It takes a little time. The European Union wouldn't talk to us. They wouldn't talk to President Obama, wouldn't even talk to him. And then I said, that's okay, you don't have to talk to me. Jean-Claude is a tough man. He's a very good man. I like him, but he's tough. He's nasty. He's the kind of guy I want negotiating for me. But he's a tough, tough cookie. And I said to him, we have to renegotiate the deal. He said, but Mr. President, we are very happy with the deal. We don't want to negotiate. I said, you may be happy with the deal, but I'm not happy with the deal. And he didn't want to renegotiate. And after 3 times, he still didn't want to renegotiate. I said, that's okay. We don't have to renegotiate any longer. We're going to put a tariff on all of the millions of cars you send into the United States. And honestly, he was in my office so quickly from Europe that I didn't know they had airplanes that flew that fast. I said, where did you find this plane? And we have the semblance of a deal because it's, to a large extent, economically all about cars. Cars is a very big factor, and they send millions of BMWs and Mercedes into our country. So we are working on trade very hard. It's very important to me. It has been for 30 years. I've been saying for 30 years. It started with Japan. I talked about Japan. I was right. I talked about China. I was right. It's what I do, and I like doing it, but I like doing it for the people because our country has been abused and taken advantage of by virtually every country that it does business with, and we're just not letting that happen anymore. And that includes what I said previously about the military. Please.
President Duda, welcome back to the U.S. As it relates to U.S.-EU relations, as the President mentioned, Poland is a proud member of the European Union. How would you describe U.S.-EU relations right now? Did you talk about improving that relationship? Did you carry a special message to the President from Mr. Juncker?
Szanowny panie redaktorze, bardzo bym chciał.
Sir, I would be very happy if it was Poland which would disrupt the trade balance of the United States. I really would be happy if that was the case, because my understanding as far as politics is concerned and caring for the matters of your country is similar to the view of Mr. President Trump. Mr. Trump is saying America first, and I'm saying Poland first. So we understand each other very well. And it is hard for me to be surprised.
All right, we're continuing to monitor this joint press availability with the President Trump and the President Duda of Poland. Mr. Trump responding to one question regarding the big story right now in Washington. That is the status of the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, his nomination to the Supreme Court, and the accusations made by Christine Blasey Ford of sexual assault dating back to when they were teenagers. The president saying he feels very badly for Kavanaugh, saying he doesn't deserve this. Some may note that he made no statement regarding Christine Blasey Ford. Let me go to Chuck Todd right now. Chuck, what stood out to you?
I think the fact that the president did a little bit what some Republicans have feared, that he was essentially going to start taking some sides that would look like he was questioning the accuser in a way that would make some feel uncomfortable. He seemed to walk that line. He talked about how much he felt sorry for Brett Kavanaugh and his family, and didn't talk about her. I think that will stand out to some on this. And this is what makes this so fraught with peril politically, frankly. I mean, look, we're in the heat of the midterm season. The gender divide in this country over President Trump is massive. It has been massive. This is only going to add fuel to the fire, this sort of the fact that it is a he said, she said. It is, we've been in the middle of this Me Too reckoning. So I think that it just was an example of how you can see how easily, I think, that the president or someone else can step in a pothole on this and cause themselves more political headaches.
All right, Chuck, let me turn to Andrea Mitchell. Andrew, you've been watching along with me. What stood out to you?
Well, just that, and also the fact that he went after Senator Feinstein for not revealing to Judge Kavanaugh during their meetings that there was this allegation. The fact is that she was basically asked to be confidential. The accuser, Christine Ford, Dr. Ford, said that she did not want anyone to know about this, not Judge Kavanaugh or anyone else. So until she was, as an alleged victim, willing to go forward, Senator Feinstein felt that that confidentiality had to be observed. So his take, the president's take, is that this was the Democrats. He said they're lousy politicians. They obstruct, they resist. They were waiting to the last minute to, unload this, and that was his criticism. Just a point quickly about what Chuck Todd said. At least two of those very tight Senate races involve women, Democratic women, three actually in Minnesota as well, Democratic women against male opponents, and that could be enough to tip the Senate if this thing really blew up.
All right, Andrea Mitchell, thank you. We are going to, of course, continue to follow this story. We'll have full details tonight on NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News in New York. Good day.